Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Villanova Tip Time. I'm your host, Chris Notaro. Tonight is January 5th, 2022. Holy crap, can you believe that? And we are here ahead of Villanova's rematch against Creighton, this time with the Cats at home at the Finneran Pavilion, in what many a Cats fan is hoping will be a sweet, sweet night of revenge. So we're going to start tonight's show with a little bit of where we stand, because it's been a while since I've seen you. It's a little bit of a State of the Union, if you will, followed by our pretty regular rundown of around the top of college basketball, Big East musings, recent Villanova player performances, looking at the Seton Hall and Xavier games mostly. We're going to then talk a little bit about Creighton, and of course we'll get into tonight's matchup and hopefully get you out of here with enough time to refill the beverages, hit the john, find your favorite seat on the couch, whatever might take you a minute or two, and get settled in for the Cats to tip it off on Fox Sports 1 around 8:30 Eastern. All right. So where do we stand? Well, first of all, Happy New Year, Nova Nation. It's been, I can't believe it's January already. I mean, by just the straight up flow of the calendar, we're about halfway into the season, even though there is a ton of basketball left to play. It's crazy to think that we're already halfway into this season, and our team has gotten a lot of experience. So when you ask the question about Villanova and what's the story of their season so far, I think you start with the kind of the stats and the rankings that everybody should be looking at, right? 13-4 overall, 2-1 in conference. Number 10 in the KenPom, number 11 in the net rankings. Those are the rankings I think you should probably be paying more attention to than the coaches poll or the AP. Where it's much more perception driven, right? KenPom and net rankings are going to be more statistically analytical driven. I think there's arguments and proponents and opponents for both. But like I said, number 10 in KenPom, number 11 in net rankings. You really have to feel good about that. Slid to down to now back up to number 19 in the AP and actually number 15 in the coaches poll. And somehow this team has found itself in a position where it's actually kind of underrated for the first time all season after being overrated, or at least the talk from many of the pundits being this team is overrated, especially with the marquee losses in all of their big games against UCLA, against Purdue, and of course against Baylor. But you have to keep in mind, though, that several of those games Villanova kind of coughed up, probably should have won. Were the better team for most of the game. And they did also beat Tennessee, who's looking like a really good team. So you have to be happy about the spot that we're in, despite some of the challenges this team has faced. I think this team has shown that with the experience they had already earned coming into this season, this crazy non-conference slate, and the fact that they are truly elite when they're on, we're going to have some work to do in the Big East. There are no easy wins, but you have to be feeling like we're in decent shape right now. Of course, the thing to note is the only non-top 5 team that has beaten this Villanova team is, of course, Creighton, who we're getting the rematch against tonight. It's funny to think about, and I'll probably touch on this again later. It's funny to think about how doomsday the vibe was on the post-game Twitter Spaces that I was on with the guys from the Full 40 podcast, among others. And the overall talk track was just like angry Northeast talk radio on the morning after a game, right? Oh, in this case, it was the night of and after the game. And it was just sort of sad. And I was really trying to hold on to the belief at the time that, you see a couple of wins here by Nova against with Xavier and Seton Hall coming up, and we're going to be feeling pretty good. And that's exactly what happened. So I think, again, all in all, have to feel good with where the Cats stand in general, and acknowledge that the state of the world right now with the pandemic and what it's doing to sports, both professional and collegiate, is a total wild card. Whether we have issues within the Villanova program or it's issues with opponents, you can almost guarantee that there are going to be disruptions of flow, especially with what everybody's hearing about kind of what we're in for just as a country in January with the ebb and flow of the pandemic. So, just got to take it in stride, Cats fans, and appreciate where we're at and appreciate that we're going to be seeing some really good basketball, hopefully well into March, yet again, as we've become so accustomed to and frankly quite spoiled with. So, what's been going on with Villanova Tip Time? I haven't seen you since the Baylor game, I don't think. And holy crap, it was just a crazy December. In addition to baby's first Christmas over here in my house. That wasn't hectic enough. We battled every daycare illness you could imagine. That messed with the consistency of tip time for sure. I think also I've been wondering and I've been asking, many friends, what do you think the right cadence is for tip time? Is it an every game kind of event or is it a pick and choose? And I think so, and I think what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is I think it's gonna probably settle into like an every other game. I think what I was originally thinking was gonna be like weekends only. That's lame because you have games like tonight, which I know I'm juiced up for to get a little revenge on this game. We have good matchups in the middle of the week. Really, every other week it seems, where the weekend game might not be as strong. So we're going to pick and choose. We're going to figure it out. But if you do have an opinion on this, I would love it if you would reach out to me and give me that opinion because I just want to hear what people are most interested in. And of course, as far as to round out the kind of the current state of the union, I have to shout out Tim from Astoria for adding the newest cat to the clan. Baby H got started with a W on New Year's Day, so her basketball fandom is off to a hot start, and we are so thrilled to have her. All right, so around the top of college basketball, before we kind of get deeper into the Nova dudes and into the Creighton matchup tonight, I think that the top story around the top of college basketball is going to be Baylor. Holding strong onto that number one ranking, which they earned, if you recall, by beating Nova about a month ago. Baylor looks like the best team in the country. They're coming out of what is considered to be the best conference in the country. And ultimately, they're holding strong to that number one ranking. You have to imagine they're not going to be able to stay undefeated because the Big 12 looks like the best conference this year. But I think this Baylor team has been nothing short of impressive and deserves to be the top story after they're the reigning national champion and they got slept on in the rankings early on because they lost some guys and they've proven that to be completely wrong. Have to point out that Villanova has now played 4 out of the top 5 teams in the country. Baylor being number 1, Duke number 2, where Nova played them in the secret scrimmage, so not actually an official game. Number 3, Purdue, with that loss that Nova really felt like we had in hand, but ultimately Purdue ended up coming out on top. And same thing with number 5, UCLA. I am personally of the belief that this is going to pay huge dividends come March, this experience, but time will tell how this loaded slate ends up shaking out. It'll be interesting to see if it influences or impacts scheduling decisions in the future, although I think given the eliteness of the program, we should all expect that we're going to have these loaded non-conference slates year in and year out, which is honestly what we want, right? It's way better than sort of a boring powder puff schedule, but it's definitely been a grueling road for the guys, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of a long season, especially where there are no easy wins in the Big East. Before we get to the Big East, I think I also want to throw out a couple other teams that probably should be on your radar if you're a fan of fun teams that probably didn't get enough love before Christmas. USC, Arizona, Iowa State, and Alabama would be the teams that I would call out. Keep your ears perked if you've got like SportsCenter or whatever on in the background. You catch a few highlights of these teams. They're fun to watch. They're overperforming. You could argue that at both Arizona and Alabama, so Arizona separately, it has been getting plenty of love over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the hype train is back on for them, so no longer unobserved. And Alabama's been getting some pretty consistent love since their run last year. I just think they're a fun team, and maybe I have a little bit of bias because former Villanovan Javon Quinterly is an Alabama guy, so cool to see former members of the family doing well. So, as far as the top of college basketball goes, not many people were giving Big East a lot of credit coming into the season for being among the top conferences, and I think they're right there in the top 2 or 3. Like I said, I think the Big 12 is probably the best conference in the land, but the Big East is way deeper than anybody, myself included, gave them credit for. A lot of talk about Villanova having a much wider gap with the rest of the teams this year, and while that is yet to be seen. Although I think we suspect that there are going to be no games off in the Big East. I would say currently the Big East is like a 6 or 7 bid league with an outside shot at 8 maybe, which is kind of crazy. And if you look around, it's just sort of there's a lot of danger to be had for a program like Villanova that's going to get the best punch from all these teams every night. Seton Hall might be a late March team, but they're off to a slow start dealing with COVID issues. Nova beat them in a tough one on New Year's Day, as you all probably know. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But I think Seton Hall is really good, and I think Seton Hall is going to be playing basketball in late March if they can get healthy, stay healthy. They look like they can be pretty hot. Providence has pretty much already secured a tourney bid with the most quad one wins in college basketball. Joe from Boston's second favorite team, might I add. This is also the only Big East team that's still ranked at number 16. And then you have to put Xavier and UConn both in the list of top tier challengers. Creighton and Marquette both in the quote unquote exceeding expectations bucket. Creighton's actually, I think, technically ranked atop the Big East right now at 2-0 in conference. All in all just supporting points for the fact that this conference is stacked. And I think, as additionally battle hardened as that will make Nova going into March, I think we're probably in for a few infuriating losses that we may not have thought we were in store for earlier in the year. So let's talk a little bit about our guys, our Villanova dudes. And I kind of want to go around the horn and just go player by player to talk about their recent play and what we're seeing from them and what we should look forward to from them. And it has to start with our, preseason all accolade man, well, deservingly so, Colin Gillespie. It was a cold shooting December. If you look at the stat sheet, I think most of his December games very off from an overall 3-point shooting percentage specifically. But really never has there been any doubt that this guy is our captain. He's our quarterback. I wish I was a better actor and I could drum up a Terrell Owens crying for Tony Romo sequence there, because that's how I think we all feel about Colin Gillespie. Like, he's our guy. He's the leader of this team. And a very nice New Year's indeed for Mr. Gillespie as he got back to form, shooting 50% from three, dropping 21 overall against Seton Hall. I've talked about this quite a bit. I've tweeted about this quite a bit. Colin has this, what I call the look, right? Where it just looks like he is not going to lose this game. He is going to take over. What was interesting is there have been a couple times where it seems like he's almost gotten too much going on or too fidgety. Like in the Seton Hall game, in the first couple minutes of the game, not only did he have foul trouble throughout the game, but he had an uncanny amount of turnovers. But still, he just sort of gets the look and he turns it on, and you just have to have faith. Like, he's the guy that we're gonna ride to the promised land. He's gonna have to be a part of it. Jermaine Samuels, I've been a little bit hard on Jermaine Samuels in private. I really like him. I think he's a really good player. I've been hard on him. I think a couple of the Villanova text chains that I'm on have been kind of hard on him. Basically, almost looked like he had forgotten how to play. Use the analogy to Space Jam, right, where they steal the Michael juice, when they steal the NBA player's mojo. And it almost looked like somebody did that to Jermaine Samuels for a little while. And it was interesting because in the Seton Hall game, it was just like, man, it just feels like he's trying to do too much. And it almost seems like one of the coaches said that to him, because it was like, hey, man, you just remember that you're really good at driving the ball when you're not thinking and trying to do too much. And that's exactly what he started doing for the rest of the game. And he looked awesome. And he was a huge reason why they were able to kind of pull that one out among many of his teammates playing well as well. But I think, which Jermaine Samuels we're going to get is a huge X factor, because we've seen nights where he's been just absolutely tenacious on defense and on the boards, just absolutely owning his domain. And he's been strong drive to the rack. He's contributed a couple threes, but I think this year that consistency's been a lot harder to come by. So definitely a big X factor for the second half of the season and getting into conference play is which Jermaine Samuels are we going to see. Next, I have to talk about Brandon Slater, discussed on this program and many others as among the most improved players in the country. He had a big day with 17 points and 9 boards against Seton Hall. Not a lot to say about Brandon that we haven't already said here on this program. Just an absolute delight of a surprise coming into the season. And not really too much of a surprise, because I feel like there was just talk about him all summer. He played well down the stretch last year. But being discussed as one of the most improved guys, definitely, hats off to him for doing that. And hats off to maintaining that consistency so far, again, almost halfway into the season. So would love to see him keep that up. I think Justin Moore was one of the X factors in the Xavier game week before last. And he also showed flashes of like sort of that takeover gene against Seton Hall when Colin Gillespie had to sit out at times for foul trouble. Justin Moore's quietly averaging 15 points a game, if that's possible, because I feel like he's been so steady, but again, quiet almost. And I just feel like this guy is about to drop 30 on somebody very soon. And selfishly, I really hope it's tonight in this Creighton revenge game. One of my, guy who has become one of my favorite cats to call out for the good stuff he does has been Eric Dixon. He's shown up more huge than any of us really could have ever expected or hoped for this season, especially with the fears of this team being, undersized and him sort of being our only hope there. He's really stepped up and answered the call. He had a sequence, he probably had the sequence of the game against Seton Hall with the triple rebound ending in it coming back to him for a dunk. That'll be on the season highlight reel, hopefully, because it was so cool. We've had a few, probably at least 3, if not 4, games that you could refer to as, quote, the Eric Dixon game. One of those that he lost because we ended up losing was against Creighton, where he was really the only reason we were in that game late. We were, I think, down 2 with like 8 minutes left, and it was because it would have been the Eric Dixon game if we could have figured that one out, which we, of course, did not. All in all, love what you're seeing from Eric Dixon. If you're on Nova Twitter, you see former players talking about Eric Dixon and how he's just balling out and how he's just taken such a big step up for this program. And you just hope that Villanova is really going to be able to utilize that down the stretch. Caleb Daniels, super bummed to see him go down again with COVID, especially after he battled issues with it last year and had sort of some lingering issues with COVID where he just clearly wasn't himself for a time. And he looked awesome recently. So definitely a huge bummer to see him go down with COVID. I think we're obviously all hoping for him to get better soon and come back with that form that he had really just found. You just hate to see it because he started to find that form and then he goes down with COVID again. And so you just hope that I think the most important thing, get him healthy, and then, hopefully get him back in rhythm as quickly as possible thereafter. I think, like I said, there are going to be COVID issues within the program or within other programs. It's going to disrupt flow, and really the number one priority is just making sure that guys stay healthy. And then, how they play coming out of it is gravy if he comes back playing awesome. Of course, have to talk about Brian Anton. Thank heavens he's back, right? And he's playing real minutes, or at least he did in the game against Seton Hall. A nice steady showing for him. I think he played about 17 minutes. I don't remember what the exact box score was. And we have to hope that keeps up and Brian Anton turns into the sort of what I would call the upside surprise, where many pundits, especially after that Baylor game, after the sky was falling, after they lost to Creighton after the Baylor game, a lot of pundits saying that Villanova has no growth left in them. They're too easy to prepare for, yada, yada, yada. Well, if we can get Brian Anton back playing real minutes and playing really well, that could be an X factor that changes things and changes some of those narratives. So if you're looking for things where they are potentials for growth, they are potentials for different looks, different rotations, Brian Anton could be that guy. Although the Brian Anton superfans among us, shout out Brian from New Jersey, fresh off of a humbling fantasy football playoff defeat to yours truly a couple weeks ago en route to a championship of mine. Neither here nor there. Big Brian Anton superfan. I think the Brian Anton superfans have been waiting for his ship to come in sometime, and man, there would be no time like the present. I think finally the last player I want to talk about is Jordan Longino. Yes, your eyes did not deceive you. With Caleb Daniels' COVID outage, it forced coach to go to one of the freshmen for meaningful minutes. We saw Longino get most of those minutes. The word out of the program on him continues to be a lot of hype and excitement for his kind of early growth, early development, early ability to be the freshman that maybe gets into the mix. But the assignment from fans is also probably getting a little heavy for him because it's kind of the rally cry is like minimize mistakes so coach doesn't take you out. And that's a tough mindset for a freshman. So just hope that we see some steady growth from Longino, some steady contribution, and hope that we get to see him steadily in that rotation because I know that for all the fans and myself included, it isn't super fun when we tighten up the rotation and we only go with like 6.5 guys. So you want to have more dependable, deeper bench. I think we learned that, we're only going to go as deep as we can play big through the rotation. So with about 5 minutes left, and I would assume I've got a little extra time because Fox Sports 1 never starts the second game on time, but still going to try and end right at the top of the hour. Let's talk about the Creighton Bluejays. A preseason ranking fit for them for a quote-unquote rebuilding year, and a powder puff non-conference schedule made it take a minute for people to figure out what was up with this Creighton team, whether they were good or just ripping through a powder puff schedule. But it's emerged at the very least that they're more competitive than most at least gave them credit for sure. Although I will say with a few cancellations, they've only played Nova and Marquette so far in the Big East play. Nonetheless, they are 2-0 with that home win against Villanova and then beating Marquette in double overtime on the road. It should be noted, though, that after a few COVID cancellations, not within their program but within others, they played that Marquette game on the road. They were up handily, and they completely collapsed, letting Marquette back in it to even force overtime. Ultimately, they secured that victory, and they all count the same. So the names you need to know are sound like a folk band. The three Ryans and an O'Connell. You've got Ryan Kalkbrenner, Ryan Hawkins, Ryan Nemhard, and Alex O'Connell. Of course, they've got more players than that, but I think those are the names that you probably need to remember from last time or just be aware of going into the game tonight. Kalkbrenner, the first of the Ryans, is he's a 7-footer. Nova actually got away with him not feasting too hard on the offensive side, but he really killed us on the boards, killed us in the paint with, I think, 5 blocks in the first game. And he's definitely been eating a little bit on the offensive side, too, in other games. So that's going to be a big matchup test in this game tonight, I think, looking at Ryan Kalkbrenner, the 7-footer, where the tallest guy in our rotation is like 6'9". So can we make sure we don't get crushed on the boards as much? It's definitely going to be one of the keys to the game. Ryan Hawkins was their player of the game against us the first time. Can he do it a second time in our place? We'll see. Ryan Nemhard is their sort of fabulous freshman two-way guard. He was the lead recruit in a strong recruiting class for them coming into this year. It's given them good minutes, good stats, and again, 2 ways you can play offense and defense very well. And then Alex O'Connell's kind of that supposed to be sharpshooter who hasn't been super strong, I think, consistently throughout the season, although I feel like he hit a couple big ones against us in the last game, and he definitely hit a couple big ones against Marquette late to keep them in that game and able to ward off the comeback, at least from snatching the win away. So where did we see Creighton last? Like I said, the post-game Twitter spaces after that game was a very dark place. I think this was the first Friday of Big East play in mid-December. Nova lost by like 20, even though it was a late pull away. Like I said, the Cats were down like 2 with 8 minutes left. I said at the time, watch us beat Xavier and Seton Hall, and it will seem like the sky is not falling anymore. And here we are. And I think I speak for the entire Nova Nation when I'm saying that I hope to watch the Cats just absolutely make it rain tonight, because as with most seasons before us, shoot 'em up, sleep in the streets. Shooting them up cures all ails. If Nova shoots the lights out, I just don't think this Creighton team is good enough to beat the Cats at their best. Creighton is certainly good enough to beat the Cats on a mediocre or an off night for sure. So at the end of the day, doesn't it always come down to shooting them up? And we would love to see them with a torch the Nets revenge game. I think, though, more realistically for this game, given Creighton's style of play and the fact that this Creighton team is very different from years past, where they focus on 2s more so than 3s, is if the shots are not falling for us, you're going to see us have to bang it out on defense, which is what you would have read if you read the VU Hoops preview for this game, which was excellent. And ultimately, like I said a few moments ago, I think one of the keys to the game is that very wide spectrum of outcomes on rebound control that we've seen from Villanova, with the last Creighton game being among the lows. So even though, yes, size is a problem for us, we've overcome that problem. We've looked great on the boards against some teams that had some big dudes. And if we can do a decent job in this department and have a decent enough / good shooting night, Cats fans are going to go home happy. So with that brings us to the exact sign-off time for tonight's game. So what do you say we get ready for the action on Fox Sports 1? We'll give you a minute here, refresh your beverage, find your favorite seat on the couch, because, ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time. Thank you for joining, and let's crush the rest of this week, all right?